We start off watching a deer in a serene forest, but after a predator starts chasing it, we cut to Bella, who's saying goodbye to her mother. Bella ends up moving to Forks, Washington with her dad Charlie, and it's painfully obvious that he hasn't really been around. After getting shown to her room, she sees that Jacob and his father Billy are visiting from the reservation. It turns out that Charlie just bought an old school truck off of Billy as a homecoming present for Bella. She drives it to her new school the next day, and she tries to fit in the best that she can. It definitely does not work. She meets Jessica, Mike, and Eric, but that's not thanks to her kind demeanor. She doesn't have one. Everything that happens to Bella is not because Bella actually does something to make it happen. She's the classic character that everything just seems to happen around her, and she kind of goes with it even though she probably shouldn't. When it's time for lunch, she sits with her new friend, but she's distracted when the Cullens arrive. Get ready, this is where it all began. When Edward walks in, Bella's face starts making all sorts of weird contorted faces. But so did every teenage girl in 2008. When Bella goes to class, the fan sends her scent over to Edward, and he seems to act like he's going to be sick. Bella sits next to him, but they don't really talk throughout the experiment. He just stares at her the whole class until the bell rings, and he shoots out of the room. When Bella goes to the office, she finds out he's there and trying to change his science class. After school, Bella goes to eat with Charlie, and the whole town talks about how things were when she used to visit as a kid. That night, she calls her mom in Florida, and her mom asks how school's going. Bella quickly avoids the conversation, and the next day she plans to confront Edward on what his problem is with her. He never shows up though. The next day, Edward finally shows up for biology, and he finally introduces himself to Bella and apologizes for last week. He makes small talk to try and break the ice, but it just comes across as painfully awkward. When school's done, Bella goes to her truck, but suddenly a driver loses control of his van, and Edward arrives in the blink of an eye and stops the van from crushing her with his bare hands. Edward disappears, and Bella's rushed to the hospital where Dr. Cullen takes a look at her. When Bella comes out into the hallway, she sees Dr. Cullen, Edward, and Rosalie talking about what's best for the family, and she calls Edward over. She tries to tell him that she knows he stopped the van, but he tells her that he'll never tell her. After that, she starts dreaming about Edward stalking her in her bedroom at night, as did half the teenagers that watched the movie, I guess. After that, school's awkward between the two of them, but suddenly he decides to be nice. Bella comments on his mood swings, and he tells her that she should probably just stay away. He wants to know her thoughts on what happened, but when she mentions superhero powers, he tries to ask about the possibility that he isn't the good guy. She tells him to come with her to the beach that night with all of her friends, but he gets thrown off when he hears what beach it is. That evening at the beach, Jacob and his reservation friends show up, and they tell her that the Cullens aren't welcome on their reservation beach. When Bella gets Jacob alone to ask him about it, he tells her the legend of his tribe being descendants of wolves. Then he tells them that the Cullens are supposedly from a tribe that they made a treaty with not to reveal their true nature. When you get into old reservation legends, that's how you know when you're dealing with something seriously dark. How about we just leave the Cullens alone? Nope. Bella does her best detective work yet on Google. Honestly, you can find anything on Google. In a quick scene, we see that some strange people attack a man on a boat, and they call him their food. When we cut back to the school, Bella's friends talk about how they're ready for prom, and they're going to go dress shopping in a nearby town. Bella decides to follow along, and she goes to a reservation-owned bookshop to buy a book on legends. When she leaves, she runs into some bad guys in an alley, and they corner her in a back parking lot. Suddenly, Edward shows up and tells her to get in the car. After scaring off the guys, Edward speeds off, and he tells Bella that he knows the repulsive things those guys are thinking. He takes her to the restaurant that Jessica and Angela had been waiting for her at. After seeing her show up with Edward, they decide to let them be alone. Over a nice dinner where Edward doesn't eat, he starts to slip and tells her bits and pieces of his powers. This is not a typical love story, and every time the characters make a pained face or an expressionless face, I remember why people made fun of this movie. It gets really rough at times. On the drive home, they spot multiple police cars and Dr. Cullen's car outside the boat dock where those people killed that man, and they pull in to see what's going on. Dr. Cullen explains that there was another animal attack, and he tells Bella to go inside with her father. When she sees him, he seems shaken to have lost a good friend, and he gives her a bottle of pepper spray to carry before they head home. When Bella gets home, she opens up the Legends book she just bought, and she finds passages about vampires. The next morning, Bella waits for Edward in the school parking lot, and he can see the determination in her face. She leads him into the nearby forest, and she tells him that she knows exactly what he is. This is where Edward loses points. In an attempt to scare Bella, he throws her on his back and Cheetah runs through the forest. Is that supposed to scare her? 'Cause that's awesome. You know what does scare me? The fact that they changed the most basic rules of vampires. He takes her up to the top of the mountain to show her what he looks like in the sun. I hate the sparkling, it's completely wrong, and I absolutely hated the whole logic behind this. Who cares? Go on and walk around in the sun. Edward shows off his power some more, and Bella promises that she's not scared of him. He tells her that his family is different from other vampires because they've learned to eat only animal blood. But he's not sure that he can control himself around her. So naturally, they decide to go with their love. After that, Edward and Bella did everything together. They make quite a stir when they start arriving at school together. Later, he tells Bella that Carlisle saved his life from Spanish influenza back in 1918. He explains that it was other vampires that have been killing people around. Then he tells her that he wants to take her to meet his family, and she seems more scared about impressing his family than them being vampires. After he leaves her house, he passes by Billy and Jacob, and there's definitely some animosity there. The next day, Edward takes Bella to his family's house. I want this house. This is almost my dream house out in the woods. One of the only houses that beats this for me is the cabin in The Evil Dead. Don't judge me. Bella meets all of the family, and it turns out that things go quite well. Aside from Rosalie, the rest of the family doesn't seem to have a problem with her. She officially meets Dr. Cullen, Esme, Alice, Jasper, and Emmett before heading up to Edward's room where they slow dance to some classical music before Edward decides to leap from tree to tree with her like a spider monkey. Amazingly enough, everyone still has their clothes on. Don't expect much of that in the second movie, by the way. In the next one, there's more topless dudes than on a beach in California. You wouldn't even remember that it's actually in freezing cold Washington. Later on, life goes on as usual. Bella's friends talk about how they don't support her dating Edward, her dad worries about leaving her alone too much, and she starts talking to her mom about Edward until he literally appears on her bed. Edward tells her that he likes watching her sleep, because that's not creepy, that's a sign of true love for sure. Do you really love your partner until you creepily stand in the corner watching them sleep? I don't think so. Step your game up, guys! Sarcasm. Very much sarcasm, don't do that. Edward decides that he wants to try and kiss her. And when it starts to progress into something more, Edward shows that he has more self-control than he thought he did. Instead, they end up taking the night away, and Edward watches her sleep. The next day, Bella drops the bomb of dating Edward on Charlie while he's cleaning his shotgun. This is part of what makes Charlie the unsung hero of this movie. The meeting goes well and Charlie makes sure Bella still has her pepper spray. This is a movie about vampires and Charlie's over here about to have Bella fend off the world with pepper spray. Priorities. Bella heads out with Edward to call a game of baseball that his family plays when the thunderstorm rolls in. Everything's going well until Alice senses the hostile vampires approaching. When they show up, Edward tries to have Bella mask her scent as best as possible. The hostile vampires introduce themselves as Laurent, Victoria, and James. Dr. Cullen explains that their hunting seems to have caused a mess for them in their territory. Laurent assures them that they're leaving soon, and he talks them into letting them play ball with them. Just then, the wind sends Bella's scent towards James, and they know now that there's a human amongst them. Laurent and his group decide to take their leave, and Edward tells her that James isn't going to stop until he hunts her down. Way to go, this is fantastic. He tries to get her out of town, but she decides to go home first. To make sure that James doesn't go after Charlie, she breaks his heart and pretends to move out. I mean, she really dug in deep with Charlie. He didn't deserve that. If she just gave him back the pepper spray, he could defend himself. When Charlie begs her because he finally got her back, and she throws out that she has to get out or she'll be stuck there like her mom was before the divorce, oh, that hurt. That's the real reason I don't like Bella. Charlie watches as Bella drives away in her truck, and so does James. When she gets a little bit down the road, Edward pops up on the side of the truck and promises her that Charlie will forgive her. Then Emmett drops into the bed of the truck, and Dallas appears driving the car behind them. When Edward gets them to his house, all of the Cullens split up and try to lead James on a wild goose chase while Alice and Jasper actually take Bella in another direction. James follows the decoy for a while, but when he notices another scent, he changes course. James manages to make his way to Bella's old house, and he calls Bella to tell her to get away from Jasper and Dallas. He tells her to go to her old ballet studio, and Bella takes a taxi all the way. Bella's an absolute idiot for going alone. She's never dealt with this guy, and she has no idea of whether he'd follow through with his promises. She does have the pepper spray though. Points for Charlie. When she gets there, she comes face to face with James and starts recording their time together. Bella tries to use the pepper spray, but she seems to have forgotten that she's going against a freaking vampire. He tosses her into the wall and she starts to bleed. While still filming, James decides to break her leg, and suddenly Edward shows up and tackles James. The two of them fight for a moment, but James suddenly bites Bella's arm. In return, Edward bests James, and the other Cullen members show up to take over. Alice rips off James's head, and Emmett and Jasper throw his body into the fire they made. Dr. Cullen in turn has Edward suck the vampire poison from Bella's veins, but he almost doesn't stop sucking. You got the joke there? Either way, anyone who knows how the series goes and hates the next movie knows that it could have been completely avoided if they just let her turn there. I hate New Moon, in case you can't tell. Bella wakes up later in the hospital to find her mother there, and her mother tells her the story that Dr. Cullen and Edward told her. Bella has her mom go get Charlie so she can apologize, and Edward tries to convince her to go to Florida with her mom. Bella absolutely refuses, and they end up right back where they were before James ever showed up. After getting Bella back home to Forks, Edward takes Bella to prom. Once there, Jacob shows up out of the woods, and he says that his dad paid him to tell her to break up with Edward. Just then, Edward shows up again, and Jacob takes his leave. Edward and Bella make their way around the dance floor and she says hello to all of her friends. Within minutes, Edward can see that she hates being in here, and he takes her to the gazebo outside so they can slow dance. This looks like it's ripped right out of Cinderella's story, but Cinderella has a big old cast boot on her leg. Realistic romance. Oh, now she's talking about becoming a vampire. Now it's really realistic. Edward pretends to get ready to bite her, but he decides to kiss her neck instead. The two of them kiss under the gazebo lights, but they don't see Victoria watching them from the party inside. Victoria makes her way back through the party, and the credits roll. Again, all in all, this isn't a bad movie. Cringy and definitely not a movie to base your love life off of, but by all means, it's a solid love story that sets up a much bigger universe that had the most divided fanbase I've seen since Star Wars. If you want New Moon next, please reconsider, but go ahead and comment down below. Give it a shot. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.